Have you ever wondered what your drawings might look like in the third dimension? Well, I have. So in this video, I'll be taking some of my best drawings and recreating them in 3D software. This concept art from my old Dungeons & Dragons campaign is the first drawing we're going to start out with. So originally I was going to recreate my characters in the MetaHuman Creator, but then I realized that it would be hard to even get it into Blender, which is the 3D software I'm using. Even then, MetaHumans have way too much resolution, so they crash my computer. So instead of making the render character oriented like it was in my previous drawings, I'm going to make it more environment oriented and abstract. Maybe because I think it'll look better, but more likely because it's easier. So I'm going to start out with a plane and I'm going to texture it with a sand texture. Next up, I'm adding some sand dunes and applying the same texture. I made a globe and gave it a glass texture with a bit of a greenish blue tint, as well as adding some volumetric fog. I think this looks really good, so I add some camera motion and a little abstract person, which isn't as good as they would have been if I used the MetaHuman Creator, but I don't mind. I think it looks nice and abstract, and this render already looks really good, but it needs some buildings, so I'm going to add a rectangle and give it a nice building texture, duplicate that, and we've got our final render. My camera motion didn't render, so you just get a picture. So next up, we got this clown guy I made. I think he's pretty cool. He's inspired by rubber hose style animation, kind of like Steamboat Willie. How I'm going to start working on this is I'm going to trace the general parts of his body with basic shapes like cubes, and then afterwards I'm going to apply the subdivision surface modifier to make those shapes more organic. I end up using the same workflow for the other parts of the body, like the arm, which I'm working on right now. So after extruding out a cube a bit, I add a subdivision surface modifier, which subdivides the mesh, and then I duplicate that to the other side. After repeating this workflow a bit, I've got the rest of the body and other accessories. After even more tracing, I've got the entire clown complete. I ended up giving some textures to the body, and I got this cross kind of looking effect by duplicating the mesh, scaling it up, and then deleting half of it, and then changing the texture applied. I also added this toon shader and a bit of grease pencil detailings to give it more of a 2D look. So after a bit more work, here's the final render. I personally am very proud of this. Anyway, on to the next model. This is like a robot that I made, a sci-fi kind of thing. So I'm going to start out with the brain chip. I'm going to make a normal map for it, which essentially tells light to treat it in a certain way, which makes it look more three-dimensional. I use Photoshop for this, and as you can see, it's super easy. Just a couple clicks, and we're all good. After importing the image as a plane, I can easily trace over it with a sphere and then give it the circuit board texture. In my opinion, once the displacement map's applied, normal map, it looks really good. You can see how the light just moves around that so nicely. I use the same workflow for a copper texture, which I applied to a sphere that I cut a hole out of. And then I gave it a solidify modifier, which makes it three-dimensional. And for the eye, I gave it a bluish glass BSDF, and I put a glowing sphere behind it. Anyway, I completed the rest of the face using the same kind of workflow. I also lost the rest of the footage, so here's the final render. You should watch my other video that I made. I only made one other video so far, but you should watch it.